Hello and welcome. This is Out Motorsports. My name is Jake and this is the 2021 Lexus LS 500. You're probably wondering why we have a Lexus LS on a more performance driving oriented channel than anything else, but we do really care about the cars of our history and knowing our roots, and the Lexus LS is a big deal. Way back in the 1980s, 1989 to be specific, Lexus came on the scene. They were a brand that had never existed, and the LS is what they started with, and they had one mission, and that was beat Mercedes at their own game with the S-Class. They wanted to make a better S-Class that was cheaper, more attainable, and better built. So the LS is what put Lexus on the map. They brought the ES along later on, and then we've seen the story and how it played out from there. Lexus is not necessarily known for the LS at this point. They sell a lot of crossovers, the RX in particular, from the late 90s onward, and then some smaller stuff below it, and their big SUVs above it that are really actually quite capable off-road. But regardless, the LS is still here, it still exists, and it was facelifted for 2021. So let's talk about what the 2021 Lexus LS 500 is, and then we'll get it on the road and see how it is to drive, both where it's intended to be driven and perhaps a little bit where it's not. Before we get started, please take a second, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. The more support we have, the more fun we can have with cars and trucks like this, and even more motorsports oriented. So thank you for all the support there. Now let's talk about this Lexus. All right, so starting off, like I said, this is the LS 500. There are a couple variants of the LS 500. They are all the same length, and you'll notice this is a long car. It's a very long car. This is 206 inches long, which if you're keeping track at home is 4 inches shorter than a brand new Chevy Tahoe. So if you get in one of these, they are huge. And the whole point of that is to have a lot of leg room for both front seat passengers and back seat passengers. These are meant to be, you know, the executive saloon, the highway cruiser, where all four people can be in here in comfort. So with all of them being the same size, what are the variants? Well, this is the basic LS 500. So this is rear wheel drive, and it is a gas only drivetrain. So this uses the corporate Toyota and Lexus 3.5 liter V6, but it is twin turbocharged here. And then you can go and add all-wheel drive to this if you really want that, or if you want some better fuel economy, you can get about a 20% bump in fuel economy and move up to the LS 500H, which is a hybrid. This is the rear-wheel drive LS 500 with the 3.5 twin-turbo V6. It is not a hybrid. This makes 416 horsepower and 442 pound-feet of torque, and that torque comes in thanks to the turbos starting around 1600 RPM. It is paired to a 10-speed automatic transmission with paddle shifters that no one will ever use. And you've got an adaptive suspension at all four corners. So you've got electronically controlled shocks, and you've got an air suspension to control your ride and also raise the car up a little bit if you need it. There's a button if you need a little bit of clearance to get over a curb or a parking garage entrance, that sort of thing. Now, brakes, something you wouldn't necessarily think are big on a car like this, are pretty large, and that does matter because, like I said, it's a long car and this can be a heavy car too. So brakes in the front are a 4-piston caliper with a 14-inch rotor, and then you've got a 2-piston caliper out back with a 13-inch rotor. So most people buying this won't care at all about the brakes, but they're huge. They are appropriately sized to stop a car of this size and weight. And so speaking of weight, this car can be fairly heavy if you get it with all of the stuff on it, but the base weight of this one is 4,696 pounds. If you add all-wheel drive, like I said, this one is just rear-wheel drive. All-wheel drive will add another 200 pounds or so. The heaviest version of this will be the all-wheel drive hybrid, which comes in a little bit under 5,100 pounds. Now, there is one other trim that you can get on the LS 500. I haven't talked about it yet because I think it's very silly. It's the LS 500 F Sport. And Lexus is doing F Sport models of pretty much everything they sell at this point. And with the LS, it's basically visual changes outside. It's bumpers and wheels and, you know, little things like that, unique front seats, and a unique set of gauges. And that is it. There's also an F Sport dynamic handling package, which gives you variable ratio steering, adaptive active stabilizer sway bars, and active rear steering. That might be a little interesting to have the active rear steering, but honestly, the whole F Sport concept on this car I think is tremendously silly. I'm kind of glad this one isn't it, because even though you'll see I drove it kind of hard in part of this video, it just doesn't fit with the vibe of the car. So that is more or less the mechanicals of the LS 500. I also want to talk about the options on this car, because the LS 500 starts around $76,000, but you can get this thing over $100,000 pretty easily based on what you're doing. So this car in particular has the luxury package, but not the executive package. So there are several different options here. The executive package basically takes the already really incredible rear seats and adds a massaging function, and on the passenger side rear, you get an ottoman that folds up for kind of like a leg rest sort of deal. The back seats in the luxury package are quite nice. They're 18-way adjustable, reclining, very nice seats. The front seats on this car are 28-way adjustable. This one is fairly modestly equipped as LS's go. Like I said, these start at 76 grand. This one, with all the goodies that are on mine, which is basically the luxury package, the pano roof, the Mark Levinson sound system, and a few little things here and there, comes in at $98,000 and change. If you want the hybrid version of this, you're gonna start somewhere in the 90s, and then obviously you add your options from there. So something to think about. The hybrid does give you about 20% better fuel economy everywhere, but based on what you want for features versus fuel economy, you can mess with the options and the pricing from there. So with all that, let's get behind the wheel and see how this 2021 Lexus LS 500 is to drive. All right, so driving the 2021 Lexus LS 500. Let's start by getting this one thing out of the way. This is not supposed to be a fun car. The driving experience in a car like this is more about the refinement and the serenity and, you know, that sort of overall luxury experience versus how fast it can take a corner. Regardless of that, you still want a car to be composed when you put it through a corner, because you don't want to feel, you know, like you're out of control or like it's kind of giving up early on you. But the whole point of a car like this is to just have serenity and refinement and you know, that sort of a vibe and an experience. And I think in that regard, the LS 500 does deliver. It is quiet in here. The glass is, you know, meant to help with acoustics and keep everything really quiet, isolate you from the outside world. You have all of these sunshades in the back. You've got the shades on the doors, the shade in the rear. You've got a separate shade for your part of the panoramic roof. Like, it keeps you very coddled in the back, if you will. And half of the experience of this car is driving it. The other half is riding in the back seat. And obviously I have no one to drive for me here, so we'll kind of talk about all this in one big go. So as far as the driving experience of this car, it is old school. And when I say old school, this reminds me of like a very modern new take on like a Lincoln Town car from the 80s or 90s. And that might irritate some Lexus PR people, but sorry, that's kind of where I'm going. This is, you know, 4-corner air suspension. It's got adaptive shocks. There's a little bit of delay in your inputs everywhere. When you hit any sort of a bump, you feel the air suspension kind of do its thing and catch you, and you kind of glide over everything. It's a very nice experience. It's very, very comfy. I'm driving the car in comfort mode right now. There's this silly little toggle up here that looks very out of place that will take you between all your drive modes. So you've got normal, you've got comfort and economy, and then you've got sport and sport S+. And I think I prefer a car that's got a little bit of a firmer ride. And that's not to say a harsh ride, but just something that's got a little bit more body control. And this Lexus is not, it doesn't have a lack of body control, but there's just a lot of wallow and heave and pitch compared to a lot of other sportier sedans that are a little more buttoned up. And I'm thinking the Germans in particular. They're just gonna ride a little more taut everywhere. Now, when you put the drive selector in Sport S or Sport S+, you get to where I would prefer this car to be as far as how it handles. It takes a little bit of that wallow out. It makes it feel a little more composed if you're looking for that kind of a vehicle. If you're not, you can twist it all the way down to comfort mode. It takes everything out, gives you almost kind of some slack, if you will. And you know, everywhere when you hit a bump or something, you kind of roll over it all. And it's very comfy, very, very comfy. You've got these 28-way front seats that are adjustable every which way, and they also massage you. This car does not have massaging seats in the rear, but you can get those if you're so inclined. You get a higher trim level, you get the executive package. And the seat comfort is great. The ride quality is great. On the highway, very, very comfy. Back roads here, you know, I'm not doing anything too crazy. Very, very comfy. And as far as the drivetrain is concerned, this is the twin-turbo 3.5-liter V6, which is, you know, it's not going to be a V8 like the older LS's had. I think there was a big appeal in having the big, kind of lazy, under-stressed V8. In this case, you know, they went to a twin-turbo V6. There is the appeal of fuel economy. And I think it's okay. I didn't love the engine in this car when I first started driving it. I felt like it was out of the character of the car. And the LS should be very unobtrusive. You want the engine to be unobtrusive and stay out of your way. If you're careful on the throttle, you can kind of keep the revs at like 2,000 RPM or so and never really go past that when you're accelerating, and it's just this quiet, serene experience. 1,500, 1,600 RPM, that's where all the torque starts to come in with the turbochargers, and you don't have to rev it farther than that, and it's just comfortable. If you wind it all the way out, down an on-ramp or something, it sounds pretty good. It doesn't sound Lexus-y necessarily. It's a very sporty, kind of snarly V6, which I loved in the IS350. I don't think it fits the character of this car, but it's not a bad noise. Where I don't love the engine is when you're in that like 3,500 to 4,000 RPM range, the middle of the tack. It just, you can tell that this isn't a V8, and it's just not quite to my taste. Not a bad engine though at all. Very smooth acceleration, very unobtrusive out of the way. The automatic transmission here is a 10-speed torque converter unit that is incredibly smooth, very featureless, again, unobtrusive, out of the way. It all works together really nicely. The steering is light and fine and kind of uncommunicative, but it's not excessively floaty or bad in any way, which, you know, the whole car just takes that kind of tack. It's not sporty in any regard, but it's very well screwed together. It's very nice everywhere. I mentioned I'm not chucking this thing through corners. No one who buys an LS500 is ever going to chuck it through a corner. But if you want to see how that went, here you go. We're in my college town on this really excellent back road, and this is not a road for this car because, truthfully, there's no sporting bones in its body. Also, I'm joined by Nick, who is one of the current students of the car club at my university. So, tell everyone what you just bought.
I just bought a 1988 Lincoln Town Car Signature Series. It was a one-owner car, 42,000 original miles, and it has been sitting for the past 11 years in the 3/4 enclosed carport.
That's amazing.
I've been chasing this car for about 5 years now.
So that's kind of in a similar vein to this, like
exactly
big and floaty, meant for comfort, not
you shouldn't be able to feel the road at all.
Right. So, I mean, an old town car would not handle this road with any sort of grace.
Not at all. Body roll all over.
Yeah. And I think this is doing okay. Like, we're going back. We did the one-way over, so...
Yes.
How did you think this went coming over the one-way?
I think for what it is, it did fantastic. I mean, Sport S-Plus or whatever that was called. I mean, it really stiffens it up compared to when you pulled up and making a 3-point turn. Just the car's floating all over the place.
Yeah. So
it definitely adjusts a lot.
Yeah, and you can definitely feel it gets stiffer, although I think even in Sport S, it's like pretty soft.
Yeah.
And the
traction control is...
The traction control is so intrusive. Even when you turn it off, like I can turn it off here, and it won't even let me.
No.
Yeah, we're moving, it won't let me do it. It just beeped.
Just any tire lift.
Yeah, and it just
you feel it trying to correct.
It just shuts the power down, so you kind of lose some fun. Come on.
Oh my gosh.
Let's get past Nate.
Yeah,
See,
seriously.
This'll work if you're like careful about it. Okay, so this is it. You can feel it cut power, but like it still turns.
Not too
the chassis
bad.
is composed, which is just fascinating because no one in their right mind will
would
ever
drive this car like
drive
this.
an LS like this. Like, it's not doing terribly.
No,
you can feel it cut power. That's the thing that drives me nuts. But
yes, it's trying to control the situation, but...
And like, I will say, this is not necessarily fun, what we're doing. It's
definitely a little hairy.
It's amusing, but it's not fun. So that was how the LS500 performed on some fairly twisty back roads. It was honestly a little more composed than I thought it might be. As far as the basics of the LS500, I think it is a very nice car. It is enjoyable, it is comfortable. The suspension in particular, when you're hitting, you know, bumps and imperfections in the road, is just nice. It soaks everything up. Railroad crossings are fine. You know, potholes in the city are fine. It's all really nicely done. Where I think this all falls apart a little bit is when you look at what else exists in the segment. And this is a fairly small segment compared to like the crossover market, which is just exploding. And, you know, Lexus initially came out with their brand. Here's some railroad crossings. Here we go. That was just gliding right over the railroad tracks. That was beautiful. The ride quality is easily the best feature of this whole car. It's excellent. So, as far as its competition, Lexus came out, like I said, to try and beat Mercedes-Benz at their own game. And they did it with the first LS400. They were really pushing against that W126 S-Class and then later the W140. And that is, I think, still a big competitor of theirs. You've also got things like the Audi A8, the BMW 7 Series, and then you've got our friends over in Korea, Genesis. They have the G90, which is, at this point, kind of ready for a refresh, but still has been redone in the last couple of years. It's a pretty competitive vehicle. And the problem I have with the Lexus here is that this LS500, you know, it's a facelift for 2021, but it's not that old of a car. It's been redone in the last handful of years. And everything just feels like it would have been much more competitive 6 years ago. The problem that I have is looking at all this technology in particular. It's complicated, it feels a little dated, the interfaces are dated, the camera quality in particular is not very good. When you look at the reverse camera or the 360 camera, I'm expecting more. I know Genesis in particular does the blind spot monitor in the dashboard when you turn on your signal. Genesis and BMW and Audi and Mercedes all have excellent 360-degree camera views. They all have high quality cameras and screens, and everything is just very thought through. And when you're dealing with all of the options of this Lexus, you know, you've got 28-way adjustable front seats. You have to dive into the menus, and it's just a little complicated everywhere. And I think it just feels overdue for a bit of an update. So that's where I think it falls flat. Is it a bad car? Not at all. It's a really nice car. But I think where I'm at right now is for the $100,000 price point, I'm just expecting a little bit more out of it. All right, and that is it for this review of the 2021 Lexus LS 500. Thank you so much for coming along. As always, please be sure to subscribe right here on YouTube. Be sure to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single thing. We have a lot more coming where this came from. You can also be followed on Facebook and Instagram at Out Motorsports. And if you're looking to connect with a community of other LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors, please head over to outmotorsports.com. We have a whole community over there, and we would love to have you join us. Until next time, please stay safe, be well, and we'll see you again soon.